Imagine walking from your couch to your fridge for a midnight snack, but you have to stop and show a border guard your passport because your kitchen is legally in another country. It sounds insane, but in the weird world of geography, this kind of thing happens all the time. When you look at a world map, borders usually make a decent amount of sense. There's a squiggly line, usually a river or a mountain range, neatly separating country A from country B. But sometimes, whoever drew the map clearly had too much caffeine and started drawing circles inside of other circles. In the rigid world of geopolitics, when a territory is completely surrounded by another country, it's called an enclave. Think of it like the hole in a donut. If the donut was a sovereign nation with a standing army, and the hole was a slightly smaller sovereign nation with a different flag. The most famous example of this is Vatican City. It is a completely independent country, ruled by the Pope, that is entirely trapped inside of Rome, Italy. It's exactly 0.17 square miles, meaning it is technically smaller than the average American shopping mall, but with way more priceless Renaissance art and slightly fewer food courts. But Italy didn't just stop at having one massive hole in its country. They also have San Marino, another completely independent microstate completely surrounded by Italian land. San Marino claims to be the world's oldest surviving republic, having been founded all the way back in the year 301. Basically, Italy is the Swiss cheese of the geopolitical world. But microstates in Europe are almost cheating. Let's look at a real, full-sized country. Meet Lesotho. Lesotho is a nation of over 2 million people, and it is 100% surrounded by South Africa. It's an incredibly mountainous region, which is exactly why it exists in the first place. Back in the 1800s, when European colonizers were gobbling up land across the continent, the local Lesotho people retreated up into the ridiculously steep, rugged mountains. The British and the Boers looked up at those mountains, sighed heavily, and essentially decided it simply wasn't worth the cardio to conquer them. So, Lesotho just stayed its own country. It is entirely landlocked inside another country. If you want to leave Lesotho, you go through South Africa. If you want to import a television, it comes through South Africa. It's the ultimate geographical awkward roommate situation, relying entirely on the goodwill of the people who entirely surround you just to get your mail delivered. Speaking of awkward situations, please subscribe to this almost dead YouTube channel right now, because the algorithm has forsaken me and my landlord doesn't accept geographic trivia as rent. Seriously, it takes 5 seconds, and it keeps the lights on. Okay, but a country inside a country is just level 1 geography weirdness. Let's crank this up to level boss. Until 2015, the border between India and Bangladesh was the most chaotic, messy, incomprehensible jigsaw puzzle ever created by humans. It wasn't just one border line. There were enclaves. 106 individual pieces of India were entirely trapped inside Bangladesh. And 92 pieces of Bangladesh were entirely trapped inside India. But wait, it gets so much dumber. Some of those pieces of India that were inside Bangladesh? They had pieces of Bangladesh inside of them. That is called a counter-enclave. An enclave inside an enclave. A country, inside a country, inside a country. For the people living there, this wasn't just a funny map quirk, it was a bureaucratic nightmare. If you lived in an Indian enclave, you were an Indian citizen. But you were physically surrounded by Bangladesh. India couldn't build you a road, a hospital, or a school because they'd have to cross Bangladeshi territory to do it. And Bangladesh couldn't do it either, because you weren't their territory. You were effectively stateless, trapped on a tiny island of land, having to illegally smuggle yourself across an international border just to go to the market. And yet, we can go one step stupider. Because there was exactly one place in the world, called Dahala Kagrabari. It was a piece of India, surrounded by a piece of Bangladesh, which was surrounded by a piece of India, which was surrounded by the mainland of Bangladesh. It was a third-order enclave. A country inside a country inside a country inside a country. Imagine you lived in that specific farming field. To go to your own country's mainland, you had to cross an international border into a foreign country, then cross a second border back into your country, then cross a third border into the foreign country, and finally cross a fourth border to get to the rest of your actual country. You'd run out of pages in your passport just going to buy milk. The local legend goes that this entire mess started centuries ago because two local kings were heavily drinking and playing chess, and they used literal parcels of their land as wagers. While actual historians say that's just a myth and it really had to do with complex peace treaties, looking at the map, a drunken chess game is honestly the most logical explanation. Thankfully, in 2015, India and Bangladesh finally swapped the land and straightened out the border, destroying the world's only third-order enclave and ruining the trivia nights of geography nerds everywhere. But if you miss that kind of chaos, don't worry, you can just buy a plane ticket to Europe. Down on the border of Belgium and the Netherlands, there is a town called Baal. Or rather, two towns. Baal-Hertog, which is Belgian, and Baal-Nassau, which is Dutch. But the border doesn't just split the town in half. The border looks like someone sneezed while holding a pen. There are 22 separate pieces of Belgium scattered inside the Netherlands, and 8 pieces of the Netherlands inside those pieces of Belgium. The border physically runs through streets, grocery stores, cafes, and even people's houses. To make this work, the local law says that your nationality is determined by which side of the border your front door is on. Which naturally led to the most brilliant tax evasion in history. If the Dutch government raised taxes, citizens whose houses were split by the border would literally just move their front doors a few feet down the wall so it opened onto Belgian soil, instantly changing their legal residency. When Dutch laws required bars to close earlier than Belgian bars, patrons would literally just stand up, move their chairs 3 feet across the invisible line painted on the floor of the restaurant, and keep drinking. Because borders are absolutely made up, and human beings will always find the funniest possible way to exploit them. Ultimately, these weird enclaves exist because history is messy. Wars, treaties, drunken kings, and lazy mapmakers have all left their permanent scars on the face of the earth. We like to think of countries as neat, color-coded blocks on a globe, but in reality, geography is just a bunch of weird compromises that we all collectively agree to pretend make sense. And until someone builds an enclave inside my apartment, I'll be right here.